Welcome to the Totally Awesome Fishing Show, where I am at a tiny tributary of a tributary of a tributary of the River Thames. Somewhere in, actually I don't even really know where I'm Berkshire or Hampshire, I'm up there somewhere. Just got an invite, just off the cuff, from a guy that was asked me to come and fish on a spot his friend had. He had this bit of ground, very small piece of ground. It is small, the stream is barely 10 feet across, but I'm going to give you some tips on hopefully fishing these small streams. And I'm looking at no more than 35 yards or 44, maybe 35 to 45 yards of bank, a vast majority of which is unfishable. It's proper jungle fishing. This is what the kids used to like when I was a kid. Yes, I was actually young once, and we used to go out exploring different streams, little brooks, you know, just spots to catch fish. That's all it was. We were learning all the time. Now, of course, everybody wants to go and get a day ticket to the latest carp water, whizzes cast 9 miles and hook Gertie the 30. But here, you have to know a bit more about it. You have to look for the features on streams. Stream fishing is not quite the same as going to a gravel pit or a lake. Now, this has been left and left and left, okay? There are trees here that the guy who owns it told me have fallen over and haven't been moved for over 12 years. There's got to be fish around them. As I say, it's only a small tributary, and what I've done is I've come up here because the main rivers, the Thames, etc., have been flooded. The season is closing. I'm just at the back end of the season. I'm hoping to squeeze it down a big river at the end of the week, but the start of the week they're pushing still. So I'm up here and I've come to the tributaries further up because I figure the ground's draining quicker. There's nothing going into the tributaries other than the ditches running into them. So therefore, it was a gamble. Will it be clear? Will it not? Oh, it is peachy. It's on. Nice little bit of pace to it, but this spot's got deep pools, it's got overhangs, it's got bushes, it's got a bucket load of snags, I have to say. I've got my Avon rod. I just got 5-6 pound line straight through. I am not dropping here. I'm not going to add 2 pound bottoms, that's suicide. Let's get cracking, I'll show you some of the spots. Now you can see here how high the water has come from the winter floods that we've had. It's put that entire tree right through the branches of the other tree. So streams and rivers like this, although somewhat overgrown, have to remain a great place to catch fish. But watch out for trees that lie in the water because they continue out underneath the surface, and if you don't wear polarizing glasses you might not see exactly where the good spots are, where the snags finish. The snags do attract fish, that's true, but they also, let's face it guys, attract tackle. Now there's a great place. There's a tree there that's roots are right on the edge of the bank, is undercut. You can actually in the shadow line see the shape of the dark shape of the roots underneath there, and it is a good fishing holding area, there's no question of that. And it continues down to the next tree. Now eventually these trees will get eroded by floods and crash over, and that's exactly what's happened here. And obviously it's then up to either the landowner or I guess the EA to get in there, chainsaw them out and take them out, because at that time before they fall down those dark areas are generally quite deep and the roots are good. And here one assumes is where a previous tree's fallen out and it's made a sort of back eddy, an ideal place to look for perch. Yes, the most popular species in the British Isles for, well, almost a generation really. The perch is really undergoing a resurgence in popularity with the drop shot fishing. You've also got here even this scum on the surface that is just hanging there. That provides an ideal habitat for a chub to lie underneath, and you can see it speeds up. And go by the speed of the bubbles, always watch the speed of the bubbles there. It gives you a good idea of the swirls, the currents, and you know, it can't tell you what's underneath the water, but it does give you a guide as to the pace of the current, where it slows, where it speeds up. Now here's a classic case, a tree that's been in, this may well be the tree that the owner told me had been there for 12 years. And as you can see, it's torn out from the bank, the branches and that are all underneath there, but more important, that tree needs really to be removed so you know it's ready for the next regeneration of growth along that bank. Okay, well you've seen what I've got to work with. It's pretty much a blank canvas here. Very, very overgrown. Not going to be big fish I guess in there. so small. I'm hoping to catch stuff like gudgeon, dace. Maybe in those slacks should get some, what I call some schoolboy perch, and just some good fun stuff that we used to do years ago when I was a youngster. Now, tackle. I could ledger it, but I just fancy float fishing because it's got that sort of pace about it, and it enables me to cover through the swims. I'm not going to be using light hook links. They're not going to be spooky in here because they're not fished for, well, more than about once or twice a year by the local chap, by the owner, or his friends. Hopefully I'm one of them now. Anyway, an Avon rod. That's what I'm going to be using. A fixed ball reel. This one's called a GT 3000, probably out of production, but I like it, it does me. And 5 or 6 pound line, depending how I feel on the day. Could be 5, could be 6. Can't remember, basically. I'm using a bodied Avon float, which I'm going to pip down there, and that takes 4 BB. I've got 3 there, and I've got a link here of a 5 pound line, but it's finer diameter than the real diameter. This is called, I believe, Stroft. It's a little bit finer than my real diameter, so I'm using it. So I'm using a hook link, but not a stupidly light one, 2 pounds or something like that. Hook, size 16, going to give it a go. And for bait, I'm going to be using 4 different types. Going to be using the good old mashed up bread, just to get them going, because they're not fish for, so really they don't know what food. It's only the natural food that's in there, the insects and caddis and grubs and everything that go along in the river. I've got some sweet corn, going to use some sweet corn. I've got some very old, aging, and possibly should be on the Antiques Roadshow maggots left over from a week or so. They've been in the wife's fridge. She doesn't know about it. It's been in there with all the lettuce and everything. But luckily she didn't spot the lid. I covered it over with the lettuce leaves, you know, the packet of lettuce, so she doesn't know what's underneath. Anyway, they've all started to turn, so I've actually got red maggots that are turning to casters. They're not going to wriggle much because they're getting to the phase where they have had it and they are going, A, to go in the river, but B, they're turning to casters, so they're not going to wriggle much. And of course, I've got some worms here as well. Again, left over. I've had those about 10 days, but make sure you keep them in moss. If you keep them in damp moss, you can keep them for a week or more and keep them cool, not in the sun. I keep them in the garage or even outside in the potting shed somewhere. Another little totally awesome fishing tip. If you're going to damp that moss, which I recommend damping it, don't do it with tap water, because the chlorine in the tap water will kill the worms. Do it from your water butt, even a puddle, just damp it, just so it's natural rainwater. So that's my 4 baits I'm going to be using. My gut feeling, the 2 that I'm going to catch on is probably red maggots. That's going to be for probably gudgeon or dace. Maybe if there's anything bigger in there, because he does tell me he has seen the old wild trout in here. That'd be brilliant to get a natural wild brownie, but sort of doubtful, but you never know here. I reckon a lobworm, possibly baby chub. Let's get going. I'm going to start at the top, work my way down, see if we can't get a fish for you. I'm extremely hopeful. I'm going to be going through quite a biggish bait for 16 really. I've got a caster and a couple of red maggots, because I figure they're going to be hungry and I want to try and catch gudgeon if I can. But listen, this sort of place, you don't know what you're going to catch. You really don't know what lives in these little places like this, and there's loads of them across the English countryside. You've just got to try and search them out. It's not so much a cast, it's just an underhand swing. There's so many branches here. Excellent chance for losing your tackle floats up the tree. So going over that far bank I showed you earlier, and I've got to run it round the outside edge first, just in case there's anything just laying about 2 feet out from where the branches are from the roots of the tree. Because bear in mind, I don't know this area, so I don't know if there's any snags, which I can see one there under the water. I do not want to lose my first float down the river. There we go. Now I'm starting to adjust. My eyes are adjusting with the Polaroids. I can actually see there's quite a few snags and tree roots down there. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose some gear in here somewhere. There must be fish in here. There's got to be fish in here, I would guess. There we go. Not a very big fish. In fact, it is a small dace. There we go. Here he comes. Coming into land. Now there's a nice dace. That was about 6 trots down, and what I was doing was, each time I went through, I wasn't getting a bite, I went deeper and deeper and deeper. That fish has probably never ever been caught before. Perfectly proportioned, nice little fish. Gonna get it straight back. Just shows you, don't neglect these small streams. Back you go, boy. Let's hope there's no pike in here for him.
watch these trees here. This one is either a big dace or a small chub. There he is. There it is. A nice, not a monster, but with small stream fishing here, guys. 3 red maggots, and the difference between the chub and the dace is primarily the mouth, much bigger on a chub, and concave dorsal fin, slightly bowed out, and the dace is curved inwards. So the back of the dace's dorsal fin's curved in like this, and the chub's is slightly out. Only a little weensy chub, but another species from a small stream. He's squawking away. Get him unhooked and get him straight back. I feel a perch coming on worm.
Well, eventually I did get a bite on the float, but I have to watch how I swing it in because the trees are overhead. There we go. And there's a nice fish to start with. And I move onwards, and not upwards, but outwards. Now kids, the fence must be there for a reason, mustn't it? Honestly, it must be there to stop anglers climbing over it. But it doesn't say do not climb over, do not fish here, do not climb on the tree. So being as I had an invite anyway, yes, like all kids, I've got to balance. At my age, it's a dangerous thing, and try and get out into the middle of that tree, hoping it's not that rotten that I've judged it correctly, and in fact gives me space to get a different approach and send a float right down the middle of the river. And of course, being higher, I can actually look down through the water, and admittedly when it's like this I can't see the fish itself, but I can see the snags, and more important, the slightly deeper areas. So I'm not saying go out on trees like this, best not to I think guys, but unfortunately, well, I did. And just watch this kingfisher come up here in a minute like an absolute missile. I'll try and get Mike to get it in slow motion for you. Here he comes around the corner of the bend. He goes boom, unbelievably fast underneath me, right underneath the tree I'm standing on. What a sight. It's British countryside at its finest.
Now this is what I'm talking about, people. This is what you come to these small streams for. So that's the... There he is. Let's rod on the camera. Not a monster, but look at the lovely markings on that. So 3 different species, and I've dropped a roach as well. I think that shows you small streams, well, they're well worth looking into, definitely. Let's get this guy back. Valuable asset for British fishing. Well, there you can see, even in those jungle conditions, on a small stream, you can winkle out the odd fish or two. But you know, a small stream doesn't have to be always in woodland, heavily dense trees, bushes, brambles, hawthorns, stinging nettles. It doesn't have to be like that. It can still be a small stream going through, say, let's say, open pasture land, agricultural ground. It might be some form of drainage ditch. It might even be a drainage stream going into a bigger one. Variably, it will be. But there are still features you can pick up from streams like that. Now this one here is totally different. Different part. This is in Hampshire. It's a very small one. Used to fish it for tiny days years and years ago. Obviously, it's got lower with water abstraction, etc. There's more people, there's less water. But nevertheless, there are still some features here. One of the things you need to look for is what's called a crease, and that's on the surface. It can be overhanging trees, it can be an obstruction underneath the water, a log, could be a boulder, could be a rock, something like that. It's just going to throw the current and the food off to one side or the other. It's like a V, you just see it moving across. Now also, because the other place had a lot of trees there, this one doesn't have a lot of bankside cover. Therefore, you've got to look for other features. Those features can be bankside rushes that in the summer might possibly make it unfishable, but they fall over. In the water, they might break down, they might get washed out with floods. But what they do is they catch sediment, they back up sediment, and eventually build like a silt bed there. Now that serves to narrow the river across, you know, from the width that it would normally be. It narrows it and it pushes the current over one way or the other. That again is a good fish holding place, because you're going to get food particles travelling through there fast, but better still on the back side of that silt bed where it swirls and just slows and eddies. Always a good spot to let your float just sort of dilly-dally a bit, hang around there a little bit longer, trip in the bottom. Most of the fish are going to be not necessarily in the fast water, in that back of the silt bed. Now here's one here that just happens to be a railway embankment. But what's happened, there's a bridge there, and where they've built the bridge, they've got 2 flanges to funnel the water down into the bridge in the event of floods. They don't want it eroding the embankment, otherwise Mr. Train and his passengers are going to come down, and here he comes now. Show me age, it's an electric one, Graham. But you can see there, that's the embankment, and they've got that flange. Now that also backs up the water, slows it a little bit, and makes a perfect place for something like roach and dace, I would say. So look for that. Another one on open pasture land streams, you can get a single tree, a really big single oak tree, and although it's on the bank and doesn't overhang like the previous place I fished, those roots are going to be undercut. They're going to be sucking water out the river. Therefore, anything like a chub, maybe small chub, are going to be hanging around the sanctuary of those roots. So try and get your float going past anywhere there's a big tree. And of course the benefit is, in the summer, this is winter, no leaves on the trees. In the summer, great place, a lot of shade, that's a spot for chub. There's a few tips there on open pasture land streams, all of which are well worth fishing. And another point worth taking note of is yourself, your body. With the sun behind you like this in late afternoon, one thing in an open pasture land stream, the fish are going to see you. They're going to see your outline silhouetted against that sun. If you think you're going along or they're creeping and they can't see you, wrong, they can see you. They'll see the net, they'll see the rod, they see it all like this, waving around. And I can illustrate that by just moving the camera and putting my silhouette on the far bank, and that's what the fish will be seeing. And another totally awesome tip, if on the open pasture streams there is no bankside cover, don't stand on top of the fish. Use a technique called long trotting, which is trotting the float and letting it go right down towards those features. Don't stand on top of the features, you're going to spook the fish, fish might see you. So just let your float trot back down towards where you hope that hot spot is.
So there are some tips for small stream fishing. Now I was brought up on small streams, basically that's all I had. If you had a bike or could walk when you were a kid, that was all you did. You got to the nearest small stream, dace, roach, perch, whatever it was. We started pretty well at the Jam Jar Brigade and moved on from there substantially. Hope you've enjoyed it, hope you got some tips there. Don't forget, get out there. If you've got a little stream you can fish, you can still get some action. It is really enjoyable and satisfying.